All right, we'll go ahead and get started as folks continue to join us. Hi, everyone. I'm Julia, a bookseller at Politics and Prose. We're live with Beck Dorey-Stein and Jennifer Close discussing Rock the Boat. You can follow the links in the chat to purchase the book directly from us at Politics and Prose. If you have a question for our speakers, please use the Q&A feature found at the bottom of the screen. We'll move to questions in the last portion of the discussion, though we apologize in advance if we run short on time. Additionally, we're glad to offer closed captioning for this event via Zoom's auto captioning service. To enable captions, click the CC live transcript icon at the bottom of the screen. And we do want to thank all of you out there for joining us. We are very grateful to our family of loyal customers who keep our business and our spirits afloat. It is my pleasure to introduce this exciting new book. From the New York Times bestselling author of From the Corner of the Oval, Beck Dorey-Stein's Rock the Boat recounts how old friends discover how much has changed and how much has stayed the same when they reunite in their seaside hometown for one unforgettable summer. Full of heart and humor and laced with biting wit, Rock the Boat proves that even when you know all the back roads, there aren't any shortcuts to growing up. Best-selling author Beck Dorey-Stein grew up in Narberth, Pennsylvania, and taught high school English for 3 years before serving as a White House stenographer from 2012 to 2017. She now lives on the coast of Maine. She'll be in conversation with Jennifer Close, the best-selling author of Girls in White Dresses, The Smart One, and The Hopefuls. Born and raised on the North Shore of Chicago, she is a graduate of Boston College and received her MFA in fiction writing from the New School in 2005. She worked in New York in magazines for many years and now lives in Washington, D.C., and teaches creative writing at George Washington University. On behalf of Politics and Prose, please join me in welcoming Beck Dorey-Stein and Jennifer Close. Thank you both.
Thank you. That was such a great introduction. Although I realized, first of all, I smiled proudly when they introduced Beck as a stenographer at the White House. I just got so excited. It's funny because we're virtual, but this is Politics and Prose, which is a bookstore in DC that Beck and I both love. I worked there for a little while, probably 11 years ago. What year is it? I don't know. Yeah, I think 11 years ago. And Beck and I met in DC. So I feel like this is sort of our, I'm back here finally, which is great. I actually moved away. I don't teach at GW anymore, but that just made me realize I need to update my bio. But it's fun because Beck and I met because she was a stenographer at the White House and my husband also worked in the Obama administration. So I'm sure we met in DC, but one of the fun things about our friendship that I was thinking about is we have traveled to a lot of places together because I used to jump on the fun trips. So like we've been to Hawaii together, we've been to Paris together, Mexico maybe, I'm sure, somewhere. But Beck and I knew each other for a while before she kind of said one day, like we were having drinks and she was like, by the way, I want to be a writer. I write. I love reading. Can we talk about it one day soon? And I was like, yeah, let's talk about it. And I mean, I appreciated it for so many reasons, but one is that, especially in the world of politics, not a lot of people read fiction. So I was like, yes, let's talk. And I think at that time, which I'm going to ask you about later, because I think you're such a reader, but you write a lot of different stuff. I think you were writing both fiction and nonfiction, but I thought you were really going towards fiction. And then it was such a fun treat. I have Beck's books on my bookshelf, to have your memoir come out, which was really fun for me to read. And then even more fun to get to read the novel, which I got to read early. So I'm just really happy to be here. I love both of these books. They look so great together, I have to say. They're like sister books. And I would love to start. So I'm actually going to ask you to do something which I think is a really hard question, but I have this feeling you're good at it. I'm going to start with a hard question. I always make my students in my novel writing class, give me the pitch of your book. Tell me what it is. I find it super hard. I know I'm starting with the hard one. I mean, I can do it for you. But I would love to hear you just give like the elevator pitch of this book just quickly.
Okay. Hi, Jen.
Hi, it's so good to see you. I've missed you.
Thank you everyone for coming. This is so nice. And this is one event I really wish we were in person for because it is kind of a homecoming. Okay, really? We're just
sorry, I jumped right in with the questions without even letting you say hello. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Well, no, and I have so many other things. Like you worked at Politics and Prose. Yes, it was Mexico. Yeah. You were on that Paris trip. I hope you made better decisions than I did. Like lots of things. My pitch for this book is, it always takes me so long. 330 somethings are totally lost and they come home for one unforgettable summer to sort of figure out who they are and what they want. It's so general, but it really, I don't know, once you get into like turtles and developers, it kind of loses some of its magic.
No, it's a great pitch. Usually I'm like, I write about people and then I smile and walk away. So that's very specific. Okay, I am going to start with one of my favorite questions to ask people, which is like where the first kernel of this idea of this book came. I actually looked back because this book is like, it feels like taking a vacation. It takes place on the Jersey Shore. And I read it in January, during a year of quarantine. So it was like, especially lovely for me to read it. But it just feels so nice to be there. So yeah, I love hearing like when the first little moment came to you, the kernel of a book, an idea, a character.
I guess when I was still working in the White House, my mom called me and she was freaking out and she was like, did you go, my parents have a beach house in Cape May, which is what Sea Point, the fictionalized town, is based on in New Jersey. And I said, no, I'm in a motorcade right now. I have not slipped off to New Jersey for a few days. That's not really how my job works. And my parents realized that the plumber had basically like used the spare key to go in and among other things, like take a bath. And they figured it out because my mom has very strict rules about not breaking book spines. And next to the bathtub was a book like face down, spine broken. So we knew it was like none of the Dorey-Steins. So I was like, this is plumber. And immediately you go to, okay, it's the off season. The plumber's using this place as a crash pad. Not crazy, kind of ingenious. But instead of going in the direction of like, well, it's kind of sleazy, it's kind of abusing people's trust, I was like, what if it's a really sympathetic plumber? Like, what if we have every reason to be like, oh, I kind of get it. And so Ziggy came to me first, one of the three main characters. And then as far as Sea Point, the town, sort of being its own character and making sure it was really rooted in that atmosphere of vacation and escape, I wrote this from 2017 to 2021. So it was a really good time to escape. I spent a lot of time watching Gilmore Girls and wishing that times were very different. And so this was just like my therapy as well as my attempt to write a novel.
A great attempt because you did it, which leads me into my next question, which is a two-parter. How is writing, because I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about the memoir and sort of like how it was different to write a memoir and to write fiction. Because correct me if I'm wrong, I think you were writing mostly fiction. I know you always journaled and you kept like, you did write nonfiction. But yeah, tell us about sort of how the experience was different, and also correct me if I'm wrong, because I might be wrong about it.
Okay. No, this is why I love you, because you remember that, whereas everyone's like, oh, you were keeping notes, it was easy. And it was like, what? No, I really wanted to write novels, like from the time I was in college, where it was like, okay, well, how can I do this and make a living? And that's why I was teaching English. And even when I was like 24, 25, I took a fall off, like an autumn off from teaching to try to write a novel. And then by the spring I was working at Sidwell Friends because I realized that wasn't going to happen that quickly. No, I've always loved fiction. I kind of thought from the corner of the Oval, one iteration was essays about senior staffers and everyone else at the White House. And another iteration was a fictionalized version of myself, so that when I went on book tour, I didn't have to just like take the brunt of everyone's opinions to heart because I was the main character. And yeah, so this was kind of, writing a novel has always been the dream. Writing a memoir, I don't think any smart person would do until like right before they know they're going to die. So it's not really too much to gain from it, a lot to lose. But that being said, this was where I always wanted to end up. And so I'm excited to like now be on this trajectory where after Oval, everyone's like, what are you going to do? And it's like, well, hopefully I just want to write novels. Like that's what I read. I don't really read memoirs. And so now having Rock the Boat come out, it's so fun because it's like I get to be more immersed with novelists like yourself and also just like get to think about where I want to go from here and how I want to improve my writing and what I want to think about and spend time on. So that's all really nice. Also, wait, we have to go back for a second because Jen, when we met, I knew you were a novelist and it was like I would have these bouts or gushes of confidence where it was like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take the plunge and I'm going to tell someone that I'm a writer. Like it was like, and I remember one time telling you drunkenly, like, I really want to write. Can we get together? And you were like, sure, of course. And then like the next morning, like that was my regret, was like, oh my God, I got so drunk. I told Jen I wanted to be a writer. And then I remember asking you to meet me for coffee. And I was so nervous. I forgot my wallet. And you had to pay for my coffee in addition to like dispense wisdom about like how to apply to. No, I still think about this all the time.
Wisdom. So much. You should have been so nervous. So much.
I never leave my wallet. I am not someone who forgets her wallet. And it was like one of those things where I was like, I'm meeting Jen Close about writing and applying for graduate schools. And I then forgot my wallet and I had to be at the end like, oh, can you pay for my coffee?
I hope you think about that sometimes when you fall asleep at night.
And when I wake up, it haunts me all the time.
I had a teacher once who said it's really embarrassing to tell people you want to be a writer. And I was so happy to hear it. And I think about it all the time. And I say it to my students all the time because there is this weird, like, it feels a little embarrassing even now to say, oh, I'm just trying to check to see, just to tell people that you want to write. There's something a little funny about it. So anyway, that makes me laugh. But yeah, we had a great conversation. So was the actual writing of the book, did it feel different with it? Because the memoir was also very like, Beck has probably the best first line. I mean, I'm gonna read it like a weirdo. But it's like just a beautiful first line. On a night like this, I wait for the voice of God. And I remember reading it being like, yeah, because, unless you work in that, you don't know what the voice of God refers. Like it's a really good first line. So it was like was one easier than the other, or did they both have their moments?
The first one was really cathartic and just like I was working on for the whole time I was there and just kind of like gushed out into the world. And so it was easy to write and then really more difficult once it was in people's hands. And it was like, oh, right. Now everyone gets to have an opinion, right? Which I guess is how it is no matter what, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. And this one was just so exciting because anything could happen. So like at one point there was a body in the basement of a convent, which is obviously not in the final draft. But it was so fun to just be like, choose your own adventure. At one point, this woman got killed off because my agent found her annoying, which I was like, that's the whole point. She's like, you have enough annoying characters. We don't need more. But
that's so funny. Did anyone, no, that's, of course I've killed off. No one knows. I don't actually kill them, but they like exit the book. Did anyone jump in at the end? I've had that happen too, where characters pop in and you're like, oh, I didn't see you coming.
No one of significance, like Miss Rose, the librarian who reads to children every Wednesday, who hates children. She got to take up a little more space than I had initially planned, just because I enjoyed writing her so much.
A very vivid character.
Yeah, and her lumbar pillow. So, but no one big. But also, I want to flip it back to you because you wrote The Hopefuls, which is also set in DC in that whole world. And it came out when we were still in the White House and everyone was like, is this so-and-so? And is this so-and-so? And I was like, in some ways that almost seems more difficult to try to like toe the line between fiction and like inspiration when it's in real time.
It's funny because I admire so much that you wrote a memoir. I will never, but I'm getting a little bit.
Why? Tell me why.
What would it be? It would be about like I don't know, me writing and what snacks I choose. I don't know. Well, no, because I think with the funny thing is, and I'm sure you've heard this, but that like everyone always says with memoirs, people want to find out what's not true. And with fiction, people want to find out what's true. And I do it too. You do it too. You know, like you read a book and you're like, oh, so I wonder if this is who she was, or like, this is what she thinks of her husband. And I could have never written The Hopefuls as my first book because I was really sensitive to it with my first two books, especially my first book. It felt really funny to me on tour for people to be like, well, was this based on, I mean, I got emails from people being like, is this character based on me? I'm like, one, that's very presumptuous. And so by The Hopefuls, I think I was a little bit, I mean, I'm making myself sound like I'm like really, you know, I don't know, evolved. I'm not, but I was like just in a better place. I got this note from this woman being like, this is what you got wrong. Also, there is no one at this agency by that name. I'm like, because this was a novel. I was like, I know there's no one there by that. I hope there's no one there by that name. But yeah, that's what I was wondering. I mean, so I was like in a better place to have fun with it. And I think you thought the same thing too, seeing that world, it was too good not to write about. And like, that sort of like very specific DC ambition. I just feel like I couldn't not capture it. Like, I was like, this is just, it's all here for the taking. But so writing it felt different that way. And yeah, I mean, I had people say weird things about my books to me. How is publishing it differently besides the fact that you weren't on Zoom all the time with the memoir?
I had a new editor, and I've only had great editors, but my new editor was like crazy, where COVID was just starting, and then I'm trying to submit pages and being like, I hope she likes it. And also this would be like the easiest way for her to break up with me, like over Zoom. And luckily we just immediately clicked. It was the opposite. And she was excited about it. And she was like, this is exactly what I wanted to read. Like, I'm locked in my house, same thing. So it was just like, let's go for it. Okay. Like, you like Sea Point, let's just dive further into it. As far as what else, again, it was, I think for me, I guess they're so different that one of the few similarities was that I got to really just explore people I knew or thought I knew and just examine them. And so Miles especially is based on people whose paths I crossed, who was like, okay, from the outset, you have it so easy. And what I love about Ziggy is Ziggy does not have it easy, but because Ziggy and Miles are best friends, and they come from very different socioeconomic backgrounds, very different family situations, because Ziggy kind of sees Miles for like what he is and what he lacks in a family life, he doesn't have to necessarily envy Miles entirely for his fat bank account. Yeah. But it was good for me too. And especially Kate as well, who the opening scene, she's just like figuring out her perfect Instagram caption for her perfect engagement. That's going to be a candid photo. And like, that's every inner demon I have. And definitely I see it all the time. I think we all do. So that was really fun to just sort of satirize and be like, this is what's happening everywhere. And let's just call it out for what it is.
I felt like that was one of the nicest things about reading it was every one of your characters, I was like, I know them. I know her. I know him. I've had a crush on him. Yeah, like, they were just so, I don't even know if friendly is the wrong word to say, but it just felt like you were being like hugged. Like I was like, oh, and you're on the shore. I felt like, and you had really great details about all of them, which I love so much. This is a trickier question, and I don't know. I'm just going to say it, and but one of my friends always asked this during her book events. And so she asked me, she said, someone told her once, so now this is like fourth hand, that everyone's always writing the same book over and over again. Like if you look at it, there's kind of like similar themes that you have. Have you picked up on that at all? Like things that you want to keep writing about? Yeah. Oh, you got it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I don't think I can ever write a book that doesn't have a coming of age theme. And that doesn't mean, like I talk in this book about English teacher comes into the library and says, I don't understand why YA gets to have the coming of age theme. Like we're all coming of age until we die or else we're already dead. And I stand by that adamantly. And so I think this idea of coming of age is just really evolving. So that's also what novels and character development is all about. But apparently it's also coming of age. And so I stick by that. But I can't imagine ever sort of moving away from that one way or another, unless there's a more grown-up term for it that I'm supposed to be using.
No, I think that's right. That's a good
Yeah.
answer.
Thanks.
Sometimes when I'm starting a project, I like to think of books that like I want my book to be in the same family as them. Do you know what I mean? Like books that I'm like, oh, like you like this one, you would love this one, or like they have a similar topic or theme. Were there any, I mean, a more boring way of saying that is like comps for your book, but like, were there any books that you like revisited? Because sometimes I'll make a pile of books of like they really got this family dinner scene right, and like I want to get that right, or like they really talked about, you know, restaurants in a great way, because my last book, it's not out yet, it's not even done yet, is based in a restaurant.
It's coming out next summer though, right?
Next spring, yeah. But so like I got books that I thought like wrote really well about food, you know, like, and so I could like revisit them. Were there any books that you had in mind that you wanted, like that you hoped when people read this, they'd be like, oh, you like that? You have to read Rock the Boat.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess to answer in two different ways. I read Kitchen Confidential, Anthony Bourdain's book, and that was helpful because you mentioned restaurants, and I was like, oh, that was definitely integral to one of the characters developing an affinity for working in the kitchen.
Stuff in your book made me so happy, and I think it was because I've been writing it, and you also worked in a restaurant too, which I want to talk about. Like, there's something really fun about, everyone goes to restaurants, but there's a lot that happens when you work there that you're like, did you know this? Do you know, like, did you know that part? So I really liked that, but I read Kitchen Confidential was one of the ones I read. Yeah, I mean, there was, you know. So,
yeah.
Sorry. So
speaking of the kitchen.
Yeah.
Then John McPhee wrote a book called The Pine Barrens, which again, the Pine Barrens play an integral role in the book. His writing style is beautiful and simple and very different from mine, unfortunately. But that I would like to think influenced the book.
Yeah.
And as far as comps go, like what you're talking about, the one that comes to mind immediately, just because that is a book I would like to be in the same category of, is Girl's Guide to Hunting and Fishing.
I mean,
you ever read that?
Have I ever? Does a year go by I don't read it 20 times? It's like
so yeah, I'm not
like it's in the it's like in the and it's like such a gross copy of it. Look at like, what is that?
Yeah.
I don't know. No one wants to know what that is, but it's like yeah.
Also, that was a great like silver lining of a Zoom book launch right there, because you just got to be like, no, I'm serious and I can prove it. Whereas if you had said, oh, it's on my bookshelf, we'd be like, maybe it is.
No. I have this like section of books with like Heartburn is there, Olive Kitteridge. Like there's books that I like. I let myself, and I'm going to ask you too about your writing habits, because I find it really interesting. And I feel like people that come to, like, it's my favorite question during book events, but there's a certain point where like, if writing's really not working for me, I will let myself either read something new or like reread, because, you know, usually it like brings you back to the writing. But Girl's Guide to Hunting and Fishing, like sometimes I just Google like Melissa Bank, new book, hope. Like, I just like hope it's going to happen one day. Yeah. I don't know.
I wrote her a fan letter in the past year because I revisited it in my first winter in Maine. And I was like, hello, like real fangirl, so hard. And then the second half of it was just like, also, don't hate me, but when are you writing another book? And it was like, I'm sure she's burning this letter.
It's such a good one. And I do hope, I'm glad you brought it up, because I feel like if anyone out there has not read it, what a like treat to put on, you know, like, oh, it's such a good one. No, that was where I like the sort of the structure, if you want to call it that, of Girls in White Dresses. I was like, you know what I can do? Because she did it. Like, I was like, yeah. I was very single white female with that. Like, I was like, I love it. But yeah, this is one of my questions for you, which is like, well, it's a two-part question. One, like sort of what is your writing process? I find it very interesting. I think other people do too. And then like, what does your actual writing day look like? Because now you're writing full time. Like when you wrote From the Corner of the Oval, you were Well, no, you were still working during all of it, right? So like, how has that changed now that I mean, I know at one point you were making vases and pots in a ceramics class. So I'd love if you could talk about that as well as part of your process. I think it was actually, and I'm not being funny because I like doodle and draw, because it's like something to, get your mind in exercise a different part of your mind.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like it'll keep changing because I still don't know what I'm doing. Talk about coming of age and evolving. But also Michelle Obama. I feel like becoming, same idea.
Yeah.
Evolving. So for Rock the Boat, From the Corner of the Oval, I was basically working in the White House, and then I would wake up really early and I would take full advantage of my mornings before I went to work. Cause then once you got to the White House, who knew what happened? And I'm a morning person anyway, so it was really easy.
This, by the way, is like the dreamiest answer that anyone ever has. Like, I got up and I like wrote in the quiet of my house from 5 to 6 a.m. And for people like me who like do not function, like I don't like people to talk to me until like noon, I would always be like, ooh, I don't think that's gonna happen. So just if there's late night people out there, you can do late night writing too.
Yeah.
But that's like the dream. Yeah. But that's a lovely.
Yeah.
All right, so do you still write in the morning?
I still write in the morning. Someone's telling us to stop interrupting, and I don't know if it's to you or to me.
No.
All right, we'll try to be more respectful of each other. So I would say that now that like I don't have the White House, pinging me every 2 seconds, I still like to get up and write. Not Good Pots. That's the ceramics I was making when I was in Philly writing this book. That was great because I would take a ceramics class every Wednesday, and it was the opposite of writing. Whereas you can just have total trash days of writing. I had one today where it was like, I wrote for probably 3 or 4 hours and I was in the worst mood at the end because I was like, I don't want to look at this ever again. None of it works. And ceramics, it's malleable, it's physical. And like, even if it's a pinch pot, it's functional at the end. You can put pens in it. And so it just feels the opposite of writing, where writing, it's like you can spend all of your time and come up with nothing. And a lot of, and also then there's the crisis of like, is it good enough? Is it good enough? I need to show someone. I don't want to show someone. Versus I called my pots Not Good Pots, NGP, trademark coming. But for the idea of they're not good, and I love that they're not good. Like there is something so liberating about being bad about it at something and embracing it and just loving them for this is the limits of my ability, and it's fine. Actually, hold on a second. Again, a Zoom thing. Hold on.
Okay. Ooh, I think we get to see one of the pots.
Yeah. So if you remember, Gwyneth Paltrow was on SNL and making fun of Goop, and she said like, salt is nothing but angry sugar. So I made this. It says angry sugar on it. And look at this mean girl. And that's my little salt cellar.
I like that.
BDS, NGP.
That's nice. So no one can claim it. So if you get a Not Good Pot without that on the bottom, everyone, it's not real.
Someone was copying my skills.
It's a copy. Yeah, someone said they're taking up ceramics because of this, and I don't blame you. I mean, there's something so hard about, especially like diving into a big writing project, and someone says like, how did your day go? And you're like, I have no idea. Like, I really don't know. I think you can tell when you have a bad day, but also like, you can't always tell when you have a good day. Do you write for like, I'm getting really specific, but because I teach this novel writing class, and I do think like there is part of it that like is a mystery, and I'm always curious about how people write. Do you write for like a word count, or do you write for time? And like, what sort of times do you set?
I write for 10 minutes. I literally tell myself, it's the same as I think people who are beginning to exercise or trying to increase their exercise. I tell myself, I'm going to write for 10 minutes, and it never ends up being 10 minutes. It ends up being hours. But if I don't give myself that freedom in the beginning, because it can feel really daunting, especially tomorrow will feel daunting because today was a bad writing day.
Yeah.
So tomorrow I will probably wake up and be like, I don't really want to write because yesterday I wasn't very good at it. And the whole idea is, no, I just work for 10 minutes. And then slowly it's like after 10 minutes, you're not where you thought you would be and you want to keep going. So that's the trick that I live by as far as getting myself to just like open up my notebook and just try it. Same with like the hardest part about running is putting on your sneakers and just getting going. I think the same is true as writing, where once you're doing it, you're like, okay, this isn't exactly how I planned it to go, but it's better than not doing it.
I really love that you just compared writing to exercising, because that's the comparison I make all the time. About like building the muscle, like trying not to start with like 8-hour blocks a day, like building up to it and being like 10 minutes is 10 minutes you didn't write yesterday. So it's, like, and just sort of like, I actually think it's just the best comparison. Okay, I have a few more questions, but I'm just giving people a warning out there if they would like a warning, maybe just a heads up. Warning sounded very severe. If they want to put questions in, just to go ahead and start doing that so that we have them ready. Okay, I want to talk about the restaurant setting because I loved this part of the book. So why don't you tell us like a little bit about the restaurant portion of the story, and you have Kate go back to work there, and just sort of, I don't know, just why that was a part that you wanted to write, and any inspiration. See, this is what I'm doing. I'm drawing from real life, but like of your waitressing or bartending that you took from that, and why you wanted to write about it.
Yeah. So I definitely worked in my fair share of restaurants up until the White House. One of the 5 part-time jobs I had was waitressing in a coffee shop in DC. And then after the White House, I got to write full time. And that actually, as much of a privilege as it was, all of a sudden I had a lot of time to be in my own head and think about all the different ways that I could fail and that I'd messed up and I hadn't earned it. And so then I was living in Philly. My parents still had the beach house in Cape May. And I was finding myself spending more and more time there, because when I was in Philly, I just felt really badly that I wasn't going to work. Like I would go to the coffee shop when everyone was on their way to their offices. And then I just was like, I have nowhere to go. I'm just going back to my apartment. I should have just made coffee at home. I don't have to go sit somewhere.
That made you feel bad?
Yeah. I felt like I was not part of society. And so then when I spent more and more time in Cape May, I mean, it's a tourist town. And so the whole idea is everyone's on vacation. It's much easier to slow down. And so the writing came more easily. And with that came actually the desire to be part of that community. And so my friend Alex has a restaurant called Mare's. And my other friend, Lindsay, was working there part-time, even though she has her own store. But she's like, oh, it's like, like it's just crazy. The turnover is crazy. Kids from college are going back to work. Like, do you want to work there in the fall? And I was like, yeah, that would actually be the perfect way to get out of my own head and into just like hard work again. And remember that I'm capable of very hard work and that I actually derive immense value from the fact that I've got a strong work ethic. Which isn't always on display when you're like, I'm a full-time writer and I can go get coffee at any hour of the day. And so I started waiting tables and was horrific at it. Even though I had been better before, coming back, having worked in the White House, it was just like, I can't recite the specials. I get such bad stage fright. And so there was a learning. Yeah, I was really quite terrible the first several shifts. And then the learning curve kicked in and I loved it. And I found my flow. And it was like, oh, I get to be myself, but with other people. I get to hear their stories. I get to interact with them. I get to make sure they have a great night. I get to make mental notes if they are terrible, which is always enjoyable. If like someone's really misbehaving. My one friend who works in the service industry she likes to quote her mom, who says, dinner is cheaper than therapy. So sometimes people will go out to dinner and just be terrible to their server because they haven't worked out their issues. And so I just derived so much more material from that piece of the novel took on its own life. And it was like, oh, why not have this be much more integral? Because I was getting so much color and so many good details. And Kate isn't the only one who kind of finds value and confidence in her work. Miles also does, and Ziggy does right from the get-go. And I think that's also one of the themes of the book that I try to get to, is that in the ideal situation, regardless of what it is, and it's probably not what we think it is, not what we hold in the highest regard, the idea of work and putting in good work is just priceless as far as how we feel about ourselves.
I know. It's very true. Yeah, it's really true. That was so deep. Did you tell people when you were waitressing, like when they would say like, what do you do? Or like, what's your story? Did you tell them the truth?
No, so what was
Tell
interesting
them about the memoir?
in the beginning, I was so bad at serving. And so mostly people were just disgusted by me and just kind of like, you're very bad at your job. And also, what I took from it was that I was in my 30s. And the last time I had waited tables, I was in my early 20s. And so people really treated me differently in a way that I was like, this is garbage. Like people had really written me off as like, okay, you're a server, that's it. Meanwhile, there were women older than I was who were the most incredible server, like professional servers, where it was just like they were so generous with me. They were constantly training me and then retraining me when I screwed up. Um, and so that was a really interesting piece of it where it was like, okay, I'm feeling my ego get knocked around because last time they were like, oh, you're in college, like you have the world ahead of you. And now it was like, oh, you must have messed up that you're waiting tables. And so in the beginning of the season or in the fall when I first started, it was no one cared. And then as my confidence grew and I was able to have conversations and be who I was, then it was pretty funny where people were like, what's your deal? And so I just remember this one table of like 8 pretty drunk college graduates were like, what's your deal? And I was like, oh, what do you mean? And they were like, what do you do when you're not here? I was like, oh, I get to write. And it turns out one of them had read the memoir. So she's like freaking out. And I'm like, that's so great. I'm so glad. Thank you for reading it. I have to get to this other table.
Oh, I love that so much. Yeah, I was just thinking like when a table is judging you, you're like, also I worked in the White House and I have a best-selling memoir before you like run off crying. That's amazing. I love that so much.
No, and that's the beauty of it is that in that moment, like we're not, we're sort of humans distilled. So it doesn't matter that I worked in the White House. Like that didn't help me in that moment. I couldn't recite the specials. Like it was just like, who am I without this, pedigree or cool life experience backing me up?
I did always like, and I thought you explained it really well. I don't know if you've read Writers and Lovers, but I was crazy about, oh yeah, we talked about this. Yeah.
And she lives in Maine.
Oh, she does? Oh, you can befriend her. But I loved how she wrote about waiting. There is something really specific about the work and like how satisfying it is. And also, it's nice to feel like tired and accomplished at the end. Do you know what I mean? You're like, and I did it. And and I thought you captured that really, really well, especially when Miles was starting to work there and was just like a disaster. And like one person messes up the whole, the whole system. So people do have to, either fire you or be kind to you. So it's nice.
It's a really fragile ecosystem. And then it's so funny because then it's the ultimate treat when you get to go in and it's a well-run system. And you can tell right away once you've worked in a restaurant, when you walk into a restaurant, if people enjoy working there, if the management is good, if their like teammates are good, it's such a palpable vibe when you walk in.
I know. And I always look at them and I'm like, I wonder what the gossip is tonight. I wonder if they're like friends and they're going out after, there's just, I always wonder that too. All right, we have some questions I'm going to get to in 3 minutes. I just want to make sure I did not miss any of my great questions that I had read. But one that I really like asking too is books that you're reading now or like books that you've read in the past year that you loved.
In the last year? Okay. So
I know that's a big span of time.
Yeah. Well, so I remember texting you earlier this year because you had interviewed Maggie Shipstead for her second book, Astonish Me. And I was such a fan of her first 2 books that I was watching your interview with her at Politics and Prose on YouTube several years later. and then Great Circle came out this year and I was like, perfect timing. It's still COVID and it's a 600-page book. So yeah, I just adore her. And I've been
Great Circle is so good for anyone out there who hasn't read it. Yeah. It's just like it's a book you can like dig your teeth into. It's so great. Yeah.
Yeah. And but it was also so fun to have read Seating Arrangements and Astonish Me. Like she's just a real talent. And I'm listening to The Other Black Girl, which is really fun. You've read that?
She was my editor's assistant, so I know her.
So
I was so excited when I heard the news. So it's on my pile. I got it the day it came out. I'm dying to read it.
Yeah.
I'm like thrilled for her and she's great. So yeah, I can't wait to get to that one.
Yeah. And no, I mean, Writers and Lovers was unreal. I read that because that came out, I think like the first or second week of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so then I did a whole Lily King catalog. So Euphoria and The English Teacher, I just read all of her stuff. And so now I'm trying so hard. Talk about single white female. Luckily, I'm just trying to be cool.
I love that you do that because I do that too. I find it like the biggest compliment when people's like when you read something and you're like so excited because they have a backlist and you're like, great, I can't wait to, like I'll see you in a month. I'm gonna like dive into this. Because I always like I did that with Claire Massoud when I read The Emperor's Children for the first time, and I was like, can't wait to get into like I read all of them. It's like such a satisfying feeling to be able to do that. And also to like see how they evolve. I did it with Very Nice with by Marcy Demansky. I went back and read all of her books. I mean, it's like a really wonderful treat for a writer, I feel like.
What are you reading right now?
I'm reading, I actually have not, because we just moved and because I'm in like a 3-week period, which is really heavy reading for my classes. Because everyone's writing novels and we're in the end of it. But I actually, it makes me feel a little weird because I've not read anything for pleasure, but I just started Malibu Rising, which you talked about it too. Yeah. I feel like we texted about it once, which is great. It's just like when you open a book and you're like, this is what I'd like to be reading right now. Yeah.
I am going on vacation next week and I have her in my stack I feel like that's the ultimate compliment of like, I want to read this when I am like done with like book tour and I can just like really just throw my head into this. Yeah.
Yeah. That's another really big compliment. That's true. Yeah. When you're like, you're so good, I'm just going to look at you and save you for vacation.
Yeah. I want to clear the deck so I can just sit there and read it in like 3 sittings. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, I'm gonna get into some of these questions because some of them are great. I'm gonna start with this one because I'm also curious about it and it was also on my list. What would you like to write next? Any ideas from this novel for next one?
Oh, I guess like over a year ago, I figured out what I wanted to write my next book about, and then it was really scary because Jen, you know this all too well. Then you have to like talk about it with people and feel like your heart isn't just bleeding out of your body. And so I don't know how much Rock the Boat inspired it, but it's going to be about sisters again, because I do find sister dynamics super fascinating, and about ambition, and also this idea of like how we can all kind of, with siblings, you can be under one roof and have totally different understandings of what's going on and also totally different experiences, depending on birth order and what happens. But mostly it'll be about
you're speaking right to like a book that I would grab. I love sibling dynamics. I love that idea that people like have totally different experiences in the same place. Is there anything different that you're doing with this one? Because this one you like jumped, your POV was like you were in kind of everyone's head at different points. Are you doing anything like really different with this book and also if you don't know yet, that's okay.
I think I'll just be in 2 people's heads. Okay. And I think it'll be first person and not third person, but let's just delete this video if that's not true in the end.
Yeah, no one change your mind all the time.
Also, I wanted to tell you, Jen, I still think about in the hopefuls when you talk about the guy's brother and you're like the first pancake always gets thrown out. Yeah. I still think about that all the time. I also quote it all the time.
I stole that from one of my friends who's one of 5, and one of her sisters claims, the oldest one claims she heard her own mom saying that about her. And also, to be fair, who knows if it's true, but I was like, pause while I write that down because that's an amazing thing to like blame that your mom said that to you. Yeah. That's so great. Yeah. That sounds amazing. Sister dynamics, ambition.
Well, your book is coming out in the spring, so can you tell us about that? What's your pitch, Jen?
Here we go. No, I'm getting better at it. It's about a family-owned restaurant, and it takes place at the beginning of 2017, and the family is from Chicago. It takes place in Oak Park. So what's happened at the very beginning of the book is, the Cubs have won the World Series. I'm sorry. What first happens is the patriarch of the family dies. The grandfather dies. the next week the Cubs won the World Series. And if you remember what happened the week after that was that Trump was elected. And I'm from Chicago. Yeah. And I mean, that book changed because I was like, I don't think I'm going to write about, like, I didn't think I was going to write it in that time, but the Cubs winning and that is like really linked. So it's about a restaurant and just a family who sort of feels like, what the hell is going on? And you know, one of them returns home and they're all working together. So that's the pitch. I'll get better.
Sounds really good. I can't believe you're revisiting 2017.
Yeah. Well, I never want to again. So yeah.
What if you have it end like after they win the World Series, and then we could just stay in that euphoria?
Okay.
And then your book can be 3 pages long.
It's fine. Yeah, it just is like a tough, when the Cubs came to the White House and I got to go, and it was like just this bittersweet banana. Yeah, it was just like bananas. So
yeah.
Yeah, so that's what it's about. But I will say that's actually probably why it's hard. Like I'm doing the copy edits now and I don't like revisiting that time. So it was kind of hard to write and it's kind of hard to read it again because it's like, they're all in it. And I want to be like, you'll be okay.
Yeah. That can just be like the big pull quote on the back of the book. You'll be okay.
You'll be okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Although I leave them before the pandemic and I want to be like, I hope you'll be okay. Like, I don't know how restaurants will fare. Anyway, okay.
That's exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you. Okay. This is a great question. Why does one character refer to New Jersey as America's armpit?
Oh, because I mean, that's not because I've heard that a million times. And if you read the book, if you don't even read the book, if you read the epigraph before the book begins, it's a quote from Anthony Bourdain saying, "To know Jersey is to love her," which is very much how I feel. I feel like that's the thesis of the book. That's the spirit of the book. That is used as a foil to then kind of explain why everyone does love New Jersey and why New Jersey is the opposite of America's armpit. But if you spend any time in New York or lots of places and you say, I go to New Jersey, or I live in New Jersey, or I'm from New Jersey, you will hear that. So it's just sort of, accepting that kind of outsider idea and then turning it on its head.
It's also, I feel, because, my husband is from the Philly area too. So like you guys all go to the shore. And so like the first time I went, I was like, well, this place is beautiful. It's like, it gets a really bad rap around. Like, I feel like when people don't know it, they don't know like what is there. And it's just like, yeah, it's a gorgeous, it's not a secret. It's right there for everyone to see. But I do like that you use that just because it's the opposite of what your characters think and what you think. So, yeah. Okay. How about this question? How much outline plotting did you do versus letting the characters take over and take you to the end? It's very intricately plotted for a character-driven book.
Oh, thank you. I would definitely say I'm more focused on characters than plot lines. I knew these characters from the outset. Same with my characters going forward, where it's like, okay, we can talk about what happens to them in the order, but like, I know these characters. I want to just spend time with these characters. And so there was a lot of, hopefully going forward, again, I still feel like I'm very much learning and open to learning way more. And so I feel like I had to do a lot of plotting along the way instead of doing it at the outset because I didn't know any better. And so going forward, it's like, oh, I'm saving myself so much legwork down the road because I'm just letting things happen now, even though I know these characters really well. So I would say definitely character driven. And then I kind of see where we need to have like more tension and less tension, go from there.
Yeah. But I think that I'm going to ask you that question after your next book, because I think like you do start to realize, some people outline and some people just know. I'm much more like that. Like that sounds much more natural to me to be like, I'm gonna spend some time with them and see where they go. And like, then you look back and you're like, so something should happen here, right? Like this is where like, they shouldn't just like hang out for 100 pages. I outline backwards. Like I'll write a draft and then I'll outline it.
Hmm.
And I used to think that was really like, I mean, it is a little frustrating, but I think it's just also how it works. So I think like you seem to have a good understanding of how you work.
I will
how
say
you get it
also
done.
with this one, I knew that I wanted everyone, like, I don't know how it'll be going forward, but for this one, I think because of the state I was in, the state of the country, it was like from 2017 to 2021, I was like, all of these characters need to have a happy ending. I need good things to happen to all of these characters because I'm, stuck alone in a pandemic.
Yeah. And not to ruin anything, but I also felt it was the best kind of ending. I felt like it was satisfying, but I didn't feel like it was forced. I didn't feel like you were like, and no more problems. Like it just felt like a really natural conclusion for them. I was very pleased with the ending. Okay, I think I'm going to take one last question, which is very interesting to me. What was the most interesting topic to research for Rock the Boat that you could not have predicted?
Oh gosh. Oh, fireworks. I went down a real rabbit hole with fireworks, and there's all sorts of things because some are computerized now if they're happening like on land, but the fireworks that happen on Rock the Boat take place on a barge, and so it's actually manually done. And so I spent a lot of time on YouTube with a bunch of different fireworks crews as they kind of show you their day of the 4th of July, what happens before, what happens after. And I'm so glad I did, but it is one of those funny things where it's like, oh, I just spent 3 days, like not really writing anything, just taking notes and like learning the names of different fireworks.
Did you just find someone and ask them? They let you go? I mean, they let you come along?
No, that's the thing. So much of this book that I wanted to do in person was written during COVID. So no, it was all YouTube. I spent a lot of time on YouTube.
Oh, that kind of, I thought you were like I was like, what?
Oh,
that's amazing. Sorry, I misheard you. I was just picturing you being like, light them up.
In a future dream world, that will be.
Does it make you feel safer or less safe with fireworks?
Well, I loved Billy Croce, who sets the fireworks off in Rock the Boat. So I felt very safe with him at the helm.
I actually have to say I did too.
Yeah.
I did. Great. This was so great. Is there anything I like to ask this? I think I will wrap up there, but is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to say?
How's it feel to be back in DC?
Good. It's been, I have to remember that I live here. Yeah. It's been like 3 weeks. So you'll come back.
Yeah. I'll come back for Politics and Prose. I used to sneak over there because my dentist was across the street. So whenever I had to like take time, once every 6 months, when I left the White House for the dentist, I would then go across the street to Politics and Prose and then be like, okay, I get like 15 minutes here and then I have to go back to work. As far as last things, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming and spending Monday night with us.
Thank you. I'm excited for the people who have not read this book yet, although I think it sounds like a lot of people have, because it's like the perfect summer. I like, if I hadn't read it already, I'm like a little jealous people get to read it for the first time. So enjoy, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you so much, Beck. This has been a delightful summer evening discussion. We really want to thank both the two of you and our audience out there for tuning in with your engaging and thoughtful questions. Your patronage and dedication enable us to bring you this type of programming, and we couldn't do it without the book sales to support it. So go ahead and follow the link in the chat to purchase your copy of Rock the Boat, or you can just head on over to politics-prose.com. And while you're there, make sure to check out our events calendar for everything else coming up this summer. It'll be a good one. And from our shelves to yours, we hope you're out there staying safe, staying strong, and of course, staying well read. And we will see you next time. Jennifer, Beck, thank you both so much again.
Thank you.